Hello, I wanted to make a seasonal video for everyone today in the hopes that the autumn transition will be that much smoother for everyone. So it's a little bit different to our usual transition as the current circumstances are. We're probably not getting out and about as much as we normally would. So I thought I'd tailor today's session and discussion around different ways that you could adapt your environment to support your body during the autumn seasonal transition. In traditional medicine, the seasons are really important for understanding what our body's doing at any time and what transition or changes might be happening, and then how we can support that, and that is true preventative health. It's common across many traditions of traditional medicine, seasonal observation. So we watch what's happening around us and then we adopt those strategies ourselves. So I'll talk a little bit more about that later, but we're currently in the autumn transition season in the Southern Hemisphere. So what is happening is that everything is starting to move towards winter. So from an energy perspective, we've gone from summer, which is like abundant yang energy circulating outside of the body, radiating outward, outward expression, outward emotion, to winter, which is quiet energy, internal energy. So the energy circuits in the body literally go from outward radiation to inward circulation, and that energy nourishes the internal organs and allows us to transition really beautifully through spring into summer for the next year. So traditionally, we talk a lot about what nourishment you do in winter will provide your wealth of health in the following seasons, especially the summer season. So the seasons that we're most vulnerable to having difficulty with our health is actually the transitional seasons. So this is the autumn and the spring, because the most strain on the body of the movement of energy inwards or outwards is occurring during that season. So we are well and truly into autumn here in the Southern Hemisphere. So our energy is in the process of coming inward. So if we look at nature, nature is in a harvesting phase. So we're collecting everything in preparation for our winter. And the other thing that's happening is that everything's becoming a lot drier and less about flourishing and more about dropping what's not useful anymore to move towards a stage of hibernation. So we should be mindful of this in the way that we're viewing how much energy we have, and then also our emotions can be affected with this. So the autumn season is the metal element, which is the lung and the large intestine, which is why this is often where people will have struggles with allergies and people who are more prone to catching colds and coughs will tend to get them at these transitional times, especially the autumn. So what we can do is keep that in mind as well. How can we support the lung and the large intestine? The metal element and the lung is associated with the emotion of grief. So we may want to keep that in mind as well around acknowledging any feelings associated with that may be occurring or rising at this time, and supporting ourselves and giving ourselves space and time to experience any grief, and then the letting go. And this assists the body energy movements as well, because emotion traps energy, just as the energy is moving inwards and outwards during the seasonal. It's also trying to move throughout the body with the way that our emotions circulate through the body. So trapped emotions will cause stagnation. So that's the way that we can support our mental emotional connection during this season. So another thing that we can be mindful of in this transition season is that everything's becoming dry, as I was saying. So we tend to start getting very dry nasal passages, and oral mucosal lining is dry, skin becomes dry. Some people experience increase in constipation. So in the transition season, how we can support ourselves during that transition is by the foods that we're eating, the way that we're using our energy, both mentally, emotionally, but also physically, to support these transitions. So what we don't want is to take any extra stagnant heat into the winter season, because it then locks the heat into little pockets in the body. We also don't want additional cold, but just seasonally we've moved out of the heat season towards the cool season. So what I'm talking about here is, with exercise and movement, we don't want to overtax the body to the point that we've got exhaustion, but the movement, as in exercise that we do, what it does is it regulates the circulation of flow and doesn't allow pockets of heat to accumulate within the body. So to do that, the guide is not exercising to the point of exhaustion, but exercising to the point where the skin becomes slightly moist. And what traditional medicine sees that function is that that's actually part of the lung and large intestine function, is to open and close the pores, which is what is required to create moisture on the skin. So we are wanting the skin pores to open and allow moisture to come out onto the skin, and then afterwards it will close. And this regulates the lung and the large intestine, and in that regulation it builds up that energy within the body and regulates all the meridian circuits within the body. So it's super beneficial, and it will also potentially prevent the level of dryness that often people experience during this time that can occur. So that's one way that we can support our body. Another way is to eat the autumn foods. So eating fresh, local, organic is always the best way to go usually. But the autumn foods are things like apples and pears, grapes. So they tend to be more white coloured fruits and vegetables. So also looking at mushrooms, cabbage, rice, radishes, so like autumn radishes. Pickled food is really good for this season, and we start moving away from any salads and things like that. We start moving more towards your cooked, slow cooked foods. The other thing I just wanted to mention in respect to what is happening at the moment, a lot of us are spending a lot more time indoors and at home. And what can happen is that the environment that we're living in becomes really dry, especially if we're using a reverse cycle air conditioner to heat the house, or depending on what type of heating you have. So what happens is that our whole environment becomes very dry, and our body is also already quite dry. And this decreases the body's natural capacity to have moist oral, nasal-oral mucosal lining, which is one of the barriers that we have to help prevent viruses and bacteria and things like that. It's part of the immune system, is a good functioning mucosal layer. So to support our bodies at this time, you want to stay hydrated. So warm teas are a good way of doing that at this particular season, and bone broths and things like that. And then also you may want to introduce something that's performs the role of a humidifier in your environment, so that you're not getting too dry. So if you've got an oil diffuser, that may be your preference, or you could have just a plain humidifier, which just basically brings a mist up into the air. And the other thing, if you've got a wood fire place at your house, or you can use the stove, is to put like a kettle on that's just basically boiling water that's putting some moisture in the air. If none of those work, you will get a certain amount of steam and support through, say, a hot shower with the moistening of the air. So that can be really beneficial, just making sure that you're getting enough moisture coming through to make sure that the oral mucosal and nasal pharynx isn't getting too dry. So I hope this has been helpful for you, and again, just let me know if there's anything in particular that you're wanting us to cover. And today I am recording in front of my most favourite tree in our garden, so I wanted to share that spectacular view with you, and I hope you're doing really well, and lots of love.